Hello and welcome back to the channel, folks. HeirofCarthage here, and yet another Total War Rome 2 battle. Is this Amasia? Yeah, it's a cool map. Cool map. Got a lot of terrain back here. Now, people can say what they want. I know a lot of people are not happy with the way that Troy and Pharaoh now, the way those games look, and they say that it's just not as good as some of the old ones. And see, I find that to be wildly untrue in the sense that the skybox and the battlefield is way more beautiful in those new games. And honestly, like, I still think a lot of people didn't play Troy or didn't play it for very long, and in its later state it really was quite good. And honestly, if I could get a Roman setting in that engine, that game runs a whole lot smoother than Rome 2. It's not a 32-bit application. It can actually recognize more than 3 gigs of video RAM. So yeah, I would love to have Rome in that setting. So I know some people say it doesn't look that good, but it does. Rome 2 is definitely showing some of its age. Still a beautiful game, but it is showing some of its age, and it's still a fun game. You know, that's an interesting thing I was actually thinking about not so long ago. And rather than introducing the armies, I'll kind of just, overview them while I'm talking. You all can see some of the units here. This is a very odd Roman army. There's a ton of Triari. But in any case, I was sitting here thinking to myself, CA has taken a very long time between major historical title releases. That kind of makes sense. It probably should take a really long time. I mean, I think about some of my other favorite games, like Legend of Zelda. It was 6 years in development from Breath of the Wild to its sequel, and those two shared a lot of assets, and it was still 6 years. The wait was well worth it for me. I mean, the sequel is absolutely amazing and takes a game I already loved to the next level. And I sit here thinking about, like, Rome 2, for instance, and maybe, like, just thoughts in my head, hypothetically speaking, about things that CA could do with the historical title since it's so long in between development. Now, the Rome 2 engine at this point is extremely old, but I'm sitting here thinking back, years ago when it was still more relevant. And remember how CA kind of came back to Rome 2 and ended up releasing some content for it afterwards? And they were able to continue updating the game. They went through like 16 or 17 major patches, and they added content, years after it was made, even came back and put a political system in it and all that kind of stuff, which was cool. It was cool to see. In my opinion, what might be kind of neat is, it almost seemed like with Rome 2, they did it just because the game released in such a mess that they had to come back and revisit, or else it would have tarnished their reputation to just leave it dead like that. I almost wonder, though, like, would it be okay with you, and this is a sincere question, not just hypothetical. You can hop down in the chat and tell me what you think. Would it be okay with you if CA did have huge gaps between the major historical releases like they do now, but it was intentional, and the idea is that they support their titles for a whole lot longer? So you're going to have the support in there updating the game, bringing in new stuff, constantly trying to improve it and make it run better and stuff like that. Would you be okay with that? Like if for instance the lifespan of these games was extended, and, like, for instance, I mean, I don't know that it would still be worth their while, but there's a lot of players in Rome 2. Should they have kept adding content to Rome 2? I mean, they did have a new historical release, technically, right? With 3 Kingdoms. It was a bit of a mix between fantasy and historical, but mostly a historical thing when it comes to 3 Kingdoms, other than, the generals being a little bit boss, depending on the mode you played it in, right? But in any case, they pulled the support for that game really fast too, which is weird because it was in a pretty modern engine. I feel like they should take these games and, instead of trying to get to the sequels as quick, like, just support them for like 10 years, because people play them for 10 years anyway. Rome 2 is well over 10 years old, and everybody is still playing it. Just a thought that was going through my head recently. Go down in the comments, you all tell me what you think about that type of model. Personally, I'd be fine with it. Just keep supporting the games that are popular for as long as it makes monetary sense. I think they could still make money off some of these older games if that was the intentional model they took. Now, I do know that they don't want people probably split up between a million different titles and working on old stuff and stuff like that, because it takes resources away from new stuff. But maybe that's just a thing where they need to think about and prioritize. So, like, for instance, I mean, I'm looking forward to Pharaoh. I want to try it and see if it's good. Like, I didn't think Warhammer was going to be any good. It ended up being my favorite entries to the Total War series. And so I'm always open to the games at this point. So I'm open to Pharaoh. But I know a lot of people just didn't want to see it. They wanted to see a more major historical title. And I get it. And that being the case, maybe CA should be supporting these games longer and putting more time into them. I mean, you spent a ton of time and resources to release them. And again, they did stick with Rome 2 for a long time, but not in the way that I'm kind of speaking about. You know, like, think about, for instance, like, I know it's a very different type of game, but like Fortnite, it just continues to get supported, continues to get updated, continues to get improved. That's not bad, right? If you make a good game that people love, they'll keep playing it, especially if you're going to keep supporting it, and it can continue to bring new players too. Anyway, you all tell me what you think. Let's get back and look at this. This is an interesting fight. Rome has an absolute crapload of Triarii, and tons of Dacian bowmen here too. These are the cheaper bowmen with the shorter range. Rome has a very commanding position up here on the hill too, and I don't envy Dacia having to get in here. Look at this noble sword. It got absolutely shredded by the auxiliary Syrian archers and velites that were up on the hill. That was incredible. Like, just absolutely annihilated it. There's some spear warriors, horsemen, and noble horsemen all out on that flank. With that noble sword getting beat up the way it did, that is a grievous loss to the capabilities of the Gete. And this other noble sword now is going to have to retreat too. And I mean, turning your back to those archers sucks, because you are going to eat it when you turn your back to them, because that shield block chance goes away. And then they have the high ground over there, so that is like some Obi-Wan, I'm cutting off your arms and legs type of thing and leaving you to die on a volcanic ash world. So yeah, I mean, that's rough. That is rough. Syrian archers are going to be tough. I'm just sitting here thinking, like, you have to cut through all these armored Triarii, and there is a couple of Extraordinary in the back line, which are, again, pretty well armored. I don't know if the Gete, I mean, they have the Axe Warriors, but that's going to be tough to do at this point, having basically lost a noble sword. I don't know how you can cut through that. Look at that, the noble sword continues to be picked at. But those Syrian archers, they're just not giving it up. Excellent job by the Roman player here, like picking a target and then just sticking it to him. I mean, that is rough for Gete. I know Gete doesn't want to take on that high ground position, but they don't have a choice, to be honest. There is no choice here, I don't think. That noble sword is just getting absolutely crushed by the Syrian archers right now. This thing's combat ineffective at this point. It's taken so much hit point damage, there's almost no way it can become combat effective. And then that leaves heavy spears to be trading blows with Triarii. That's not going to happen. Yeah, the Triarii are excellent spearmen. And it is a bit of a wet noodle fight with spear on spear action, but I mean, the Triarii are going to be tough. They're going to be somewhat akin to, you know, a decent hoplite unit, and that's not going to be the case for the heavy spears. Yeah, in fact, the heavy spears, I'm just sitting here thinking that's like Hino, like heavy in name only. So yeah, I don't know where the heavy comes into this other than the weight class, because I mean these stats are pretty bad. They're pretty bad, and yeah, going uphill into the Triarii I think is going to be rough, unless I'm highly overestimating Triarii at this point, which I don't think I am. Here comes some noble horsemen. That is a brutally powerful shock cavalry here, and they are crushing the sucky Equites. And there's a legionary cavalry there too that's also in very rough shape. The spear warriors are there for support. That'll help busy up the Triarii. There's still some serious hitting power in that Dacian cavalry. If they use it well, so like if they can fix a couple of these Triarii and then smash them in the back, start to free up a flank, it could be really good. The Triarii are going to run into Testudo here to avoid that bowfire. That's not a bad idea. They're in the forest, they're on a hill. They can avoid a tremendous amount of damage from that Testudo. This uphill fight is going to be pretty rough into these armored units. It is Axe Warriors, though. Their specialty is armor, so we'll see how they do. We'll see how they do. Yeah, the Spear Warrior, again, if it could fix these Extraordinary, and then you could pound them with the noble cavalry. That would definitely be a really nice 1-2 punch. Over here, the Triari chase the noble horse, and they end up back in a fight with them. This is just not where the noble horse need to be. They've got to use infantry to fix the enemy infantry and then crush it with the cavalry, because this is what's going to happen. Triari are really quite effective against cavalry if they're left in a fight, and it's because their armor makes them hard to kill for the enemy horses, so they're not going to do like a tremendous amount of damage on the charge. They don't have cavalry counter tactics, but when they get in that fight and they start to grind, that bonus versus large will really come into play in a very ugly way for the horses who go against them. So again, they're not going to be rapidly good against enemy cavalry, but they will be good against enemy cav. And the Dacians are having a hard time cutting through that Roman armor on the hill, and I'm not shocked. I, again, am very questioning whether or not they are going to be capable of finishing all this Roman armor. I just don't see it at the moment. Now, they did send an axe warrior out here after the Triari, but that Triari continues to just chase that noble horse doggedly. It's going to finally kind of lose out there against the axes, and now we're getting some really nice bow shots here into the flank of these Triari. The Dacians need that a great deal. They need it. And Extraordinary is doing quite well holding out against the axe warriors and the leftovers of those noble swords. Man, that's rough. Rest in pepperonis there for the Dacians, losing those noble swords so early in that fight. It looks like the shot cavalry was thinking about finishing off those Triari. I think it will. I would have liked to have seen that focus a little bit earlier while you had these extra infantry units and cavalry units over here for the Dacians. I think it would have been really cool to see them focus the Romans' left flank, their right flank here. So swing that cavalry around, like this. You had those units fixed. Just busy the extra Roman units in the background. Use your bows to pressure theirs so that their bows don't just turn and put all their fire into your shot cavalry, and just start hammering away at the rear of these infantry fights while the Romans are fixed. Because a lot of their infantry was facing your other flank over here. You might have been able to exercise a bit of advantage over there, but at this point, it's rough. Velites are chucking their javelins in here. That Roman wall of armor has held up quite nicely up on top of the hill. Quite nicely indeed. These heavy spears are getting dumped on by the Triari, so despite the numbers advantage over there, they will not be able to send that fight away. But see, fights like this where you get the Romans fixed well, you can get the rear charges in. Another good thing about the Roman position here, though, is it has this forest, and the forest definitely plays against cavalry. You can see it has a big speed penalty. And that's not great for the cavalry because it's going to reduce the damage that they do on impact. So the Romans definitely had a very solid position here, and the Dacians are just not going to be able to crack that. But we'll see what they can take with them here as they fight. And then again, I've been wrong about fights before. Battle rhythm there of the Triari that's following the noble horse. That's going to hurt. Extra damage and attack added in for the Triari. It's going to be very effective. Here comes the Legatus coming to finish off the Dacian general. I'm surprised the Dacian general isn't dead. He certainly is routed at this point. There it goes. General died. So, rest in pepperonis, you sweet Dacians. We love you. It was nice to see you on the battlefield. But Rome is taking this one home. So some of you have decided that seeing Rome in the video makes it an auto lose because everybody thinks they're terrible. Rome is actually not a bad faction. I think you see them lose a fair bit. They can be beaten. There are factions out there that can really give them a run for their money and make things difficult, but Rome is not a terrible faction in the game. In fact, they have some units that are really quite good for the price. They have extremely cost-effective infantry, heavy infantry. So, and then that is a big deal in this game. It's not an end-all, win-all, but it is certainly a powerful tool. Their weaknesses really just lies with their cavalry. And they still have some options there, though. Even though it's not amazing, they still have some options. So again, Rome is not a useless faction by any stretch of the imagination. Though they are not the superpower whose namesake is the game. But in any case, there, fun battle between Hotel Soap and Gillen the Grey. So appreciate them. And this Gete army really had their work cut out for them here. This was not a typical Roman build. And it's just weird to see that many heavy spears. And I'm interested in that pick. Like, what made Hotel Soap pick it? The Gete are quite different in the sense that they don't have like a medium tier heavy sword, like a lot of barbarian factions. So it's possible that the thinking here for Hotel Soap was just, hey, I'm going to put all these heavily armored units. It's a forested map, and I'll just basically challenge the Gete to actually come kill them all. The spears will protect me from their horses. They do have solid horse options. Again, some of them aren't amazing like the spear horses, but they're good for the price. And then you have the noble horse. But I'm thinking about like a noble sword build, for instance. Like, so if Gete had brought a noble sword build, the onus would have been on the auxiliary archers to destroy it. And one might say, well, would they have though? Well, there was 2 of them here, and the auxiliary Syrian archers absolutely murdered those 2. So I would say that, as odd as it is, this seems like it was quite effective here against the Gete, because the Gete would have had a hard time exercising a skirmish advantage because of the presence of the velites, a cavalry advantage because of the presence of the archers and the velites and the spears. So like I do feel like this Roman build here neutralizes a fair bit of what the Gete can throw at the Romans. So it's very interesting, just very heavy on armor as far as the infantry line goes, and then plenty of skirmish options to beat back the enemy. But again, that position on the hill was quite nice too. Anyway, thank you to everybody watching. I will have some more action for you in Total War Rome 2 again soon. I'll see you then.